It was a cool autumn afternoon, the kind of day when the wind feels crisp against your cheeks and the leaves crunch under your shoes. The sun was hiding behind thin clouds, letting in just enough light to make everything look warm and golden. Emily walked along the familiar sidewalk, her school bag bouncing lightly against her back. She was only 9 years old, but she had a spark in her eyes that made her seem older. Her short brown hair swayed with every step, and her red scarf fluttered in the breeze. In her small hands, she carried a lunchbox her mother had packed that morning. Inside was her favorite sandwich, soft bread filled with peanut butter and jelly, along with a small packet of chips and a cookie. She hadn't been too hungry at lunch, so she saved most of it for later. It was just one of those days when her mind was more focused on the stories her teacher told in class than on eating. Emily liked walking home from school. It gave her time to notice things that most people ignored. She liked the way the old bookstore on the corner always smelled like dusty paper. She liked watching the bakery owner arrange fresh bread in the window. She liked how the neighbor's cat sat lazily on the fence, pretending not to care about anything. For her, the walk home was like a little adventure every day as she walked. She thought about what she would do when she got home. Maybe she would finish her drawing of the big oak tree behind their house. Or maybe she would help her mom in the kitchen, since Fridays usually meant baking muffins together. She smiled at the thought. Life was simple, and she liked it that way. The town she lived in was small, with streets lined by houses that had gardens in front. People knew each other by name, and it was common for neighbors to wave as you passed by. Emily liked that too. It made her feel safe and at home. She swung her lunchbox gently as she walked, humming a tune she'd learned from a cartoon. But while everything seemed so normal and peaceful, Emily didn't know that her little walk that day would soon lead her to something very unexpected. Life has a way of hiding surprises in the most ordinary moments, and this day was no different. In just a few minutes, her routine walk home would turn into the beginning of a story she would remember forever. For now, though, she was just a happy little girl walking down the street, feeling the cool wind on her face and thinking about cookies and crayons. She stopped for a moment to watch a flock of birds take off from a tree, their wings beating fast against the pale sky. She smiled to herself, not realizing that her path was about to cross with someone else's, someone who needed her kindness more than she could imagine. Emily adjusted the strap of her bag, tucked her scarf tighter around her neck, and continued walking, completely unaware that this ordinary day was about to become extraordinary. Emily turned the corner into Maple Street, the long stretch of road that led to the small park she usually passed on her way home. The park wasn't very big, just a few benches, a patch of grass, and some tall trees, but it was one of her favorite spots. She liked to watch the squirrels chase each other there, and sometimes she stopped to swing for a few minutes if she wasn't in a hurry. That afternoon, the park was quieter than usual. There were no children playing, no parents chatting by the benches. The air felt colder here, and a few dry leaves danced across the path as the wind pushed them along. Emily's shoes crunched softly on the gravel walkway, and she was about to walk straight through when she noticed something that made her slow down. On one of the benches, near the far corner of the park, sat a man. He was hunched forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his head slightly bowed. His clothes looked worn, an old gray coat with frayed edges, a pair of jeans with small tears at the knees, and boots that seemed far too thin for the weather. His hair was messy, as if he hadn't brushed it in days, and there was a tiredness in the way his shoulders drooped. Emily stopped without realizing it. She didn't often see people sitting there alone, and something about the man caught her attention. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way he kept glancing at the ground, or maybe it was because he looked so alone. She noticed his hands. They were rough and a little red from the cold. He rubbed them together slowly, almost as if trying to warm himself, but it didn't seem to help. There was a small paper cup sitting on the bench beside him, but it was empty. Emily guessed it was for spare change, though she didn't see anyone stopping to drop coins into it. A part of her wanted to keep walking, after all. Her parents had told her not to talk to strangers, but another part of her, a stronger part, felt drawn to him. She thought about the sandwich in her lunchbox, still untouched. She thought about how warm and soft the bread was when her mom made it that morning, and how hungry the man might be if he hadn't eaten anything all day. Emily hesitated for a moment, her small fingers gripping the handle of her lunchbox tightly. She looked around the park. There was no one else nearby, just the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Taking a deep breath, she began to walk slowly toward the bench. The man noticed her when she was a few steps away. His eyes lifted, and Emily was surprised to see how kind they looked, even though they were tired. There was a gentle sadness in them, as if they had seen too much, and it made her feel both curious and sorry for him. "Hello," she said softly, almost as if she were afraid to disturb the quiet. The man gave a small nod but didn't speak right away. Emily held out her lunchbox. "I have a sandwich. Would you like it?" she asked. Her voice was honest and without hesitation, the way children speak when they truly mean something. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if he couldn't believe what she was offering. Then, slowly, he reached out, his hands trembling slightly. As he took the sandwich from her, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and raspy. "You don't know how much this means." Emily smiled back, not fully understanding why his words felt so heavy. "It's okay. My mom makes the best sandwiches," she replied, as if that was reason enough to share one. The man unwrapped it carefully, almost as though it was something precious. Emily didn't stay long. She knew her parents would be waiting, but as she walked away, she glanced back. He was eating slowly, savoring every bite, and there was a look on his face that she would remember for a long time. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story. But somehow, in that brief moment, she felt she had done something important. What Emily didn't realize was that this simple meeting, this small act of kindness, would soon set off a chain of events that neither she nor her family could have ever imagined. Emily kept walking for a few steps after handing the man her sandwich. But her mind stayed behind with him. The wind tugged at her scarf, and the leaves rattled in the trees above, but she wasn't really hearing them anymore. She was thinking about the way he had looked at her, not just like he was grateful, but almost like he was surprised that anyone would even notice him. Her feet slowed. She glanced down at her lunchbox. Inside, there were still the packet of chips and the cookie her mom had packed that morning. She had been saving the cookie for herself. It was chocolate chip, her favorite, but now it didn't seem right to keep it. Without fully deciding, she turned around and walked back toward the bench. The man looked up as she approached again, his chewing pausing for a second. She opened her lunchbox and held out the rest of the food. "You can have these too," she said. "I'm not really that hungry today." For a moment, he didn't take them. His eyes moved from her small hands to her face, as if trying to figure out why she was doing this. Then, very slowly, he reached out and accepted the chips and cookie, his hands shaking slightly as he did. "You're a kind little girl," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that felt different from before. "Most people, they just walk past me, like I'm not even here." Emily tilted her head, her brows pulling together. "That's silly," she said honestly. "Everyone's here. I see you." It was such a simple thing to say, but the man's expression changed, just a little. Something in his eyes softened, like a frozen lake beginning to thaw in the first warmth of spring. He nodded and looked down at the food in his lap. This is the nicest thing anyone's done for me in a long time," he murmured. Emily didn't know what to say to that, so she just smiled. "You're welcome," she said. They didn't talk much more. She stood there for another minute, watching him eat, and noticed how carefully he took each bite, as though it was something rare and valuable. The cookie, especially, he held for a moment before tasting, almost like it reminded him of something, maybe home, maybe family. When Emily finally decided it was time to go, she waved goodbye and started walking toward the street again. But as she reached the edge of the park, she turned back one last time. The man was still there on the bench, hunched forward, but not in the same tired way as before. Now, there was a small, quiet peace in the way he sat. She didn't know it then, but those few minutes, the sandwich, the chips, the cookie, had done more than fill his stomach. They had touched something deep inside him that had been cold and quiet for a long time. And for Emily, it was just natural. She didn't think she had done anything special. To her, it was just a sandwich, just a cookie, just a moment. But sometimes, the moments that seem small to us are the ones that change everything. What she could not possibly imagine was that the next day there would be a knock at her family's front door, and when they opened it, the very same man would be at the center of a story much bigger than she could have dreamed. Asterisk that evening, Emily sat cross-legged on the living room rug, her sketchbook open in front of her. A half-finished drawing of the big oak tree behind their house lay on the page, but she wasn't adding to it yet. Her mind kept wandering back to the man on the bench. The memory of his face stayed with her, the lines that told of long, hard days, the way his eyes had softened when she handed him the food. She wondered if he had somewhere warm to go that night. She wondered if he was still sitting in the park, maybe under a streetlight, finishing the last crumbs of the cookie. The thought made her feel a strange mix of warmth and sadness. Her mom walked in from the kitchen carrying a tray of freshly baked muffins. The smell filled the room, sweet and comforting. "You didn't eat your lunch at school today?" her mom said, setting the tray down on the coffee table. "Was something wrong with it?" Emily shook her head. "No, it was good. I just gave it to someone." Her mother raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh? Who?" "There was a man in the park," Emily began, her voice soft but steady. "I looked hungry, so I gave him my sandwich and my chips and my cookie." She glanced up at her mom, half expecting to be scolded for talking to a stranger. But her mom didn't frown. She looked at Emily for a long moment, her eyes searching her daughter's face. Then she smiled, a little sadly, and brushed a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "That was very kind of you, sweetheart. But you need to be careful, okay? Not everyone you meet is safe." "I know," Emily said. But he was nice. He said I was kind. And he said people usually don't see him." She paused, her brow furrowing. "Why wouldn't they see him? He was right there." Her mom sighed softly, sitting beside her. "Sometimes people see things they don't want to see, so they pretend not to. It's not fair, but it happens." They sat together for a moment in quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall and the faint hum of the oven cooling in the kitchen. Emily reached for a muffin but stopped halfway, imagining the man holding it, smiling the way he had when she gave him the cookie. She almost wished she could take one to him right then. Later that night, as Emily lay in bed under her warm blankets, she stared at the ceiling, her thoughts still circling the same place. Outside, the wind tapped gently against her window. She imagined the man sitting under the park's biggest tree, his coat pulled tight, the last of the day's light fading around him. Was he cold? Did he have a blanket? Was anyone else talking to him? She closed her eyes, but instead of drifting into dreams, her mind painted pictures of him finding a safe place to sleep, maybe a shelter, maybe somewhere indoors, and in every cell picture, he still had that faint, quiet smile. Somehow, Emily felt certain she would see him again. She didn't know why, it was just a feeling, like the way you can sense a storm before the clouds gather. She didn't know that the next time she saw him, it wouldn't be in the park at all. It would be on her front porch, standing next to two police officers. And the story he carried with him would be far bigger than anything she could have imagined. For now, though the night was still, and the world outside her window seemed ordinary, Emily hugged her pillow, whispering a small wish into the darkness that the man on the bench had found somewhere warm tonight. She had no idea. Her wish was already weaving its way into something much greater, something that was about to knock, quite literally, on her door. The next morning began like any other. The smell of toast drifted through the house, and Emily sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs as she sipped warm milk. Her father read the newspaper. Her mother hummed while buttering bread, and the golden light of early morning spilled through the curtains. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that made you think nothing unusual could possibly happen. Emily was halfway through her toast when it happened. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't the light, casual knock of a neighbor dropping by. It was firm, deliberate, the kind of knock that demanded attention. All three of them froze for a second, their morning rhythm suddenly broken. Her mother wiped her hands on a towel and headed toward the door, calling over her shoulder, "Stay here, Emily." But Emily, curious as always, slid down from her chair and padded softly after her when her mother opened the door. The cold morning air rushed in, along with the sight of two police officers standing on the porch. One was tall with a square jaw, the other shorter with a kind face but serious eyes. "Good morning, ma'am," the taller one said politely, tipping his cap. "We're looking for the family of a young girl named Emily." Her mother's shoulders tensed. "I'm her mother," she replied carefully. "Has something happened?" The officers exchanged a quick glance before the shorter one spoke. "We're here because of an incident yesterday in the park. We believe your daughter may have helped a man we've been trying to locate for some time." Emily peeked from behind her mother's leg, her eyes wide. She instantly thought of the man on the bench, the sandwich, the cookie. Her mother's voice held a mix of worry and confusion. I don't understand. Who was he?" The officer stepped slightly closer, his voice lowering. "His name is Thomas. He's a military veteran who's been missing for months. His family has been searching for him, and we've been trying to track him down. He's been living on the streets, moving from place to place. Yesterday, thanks to your daughter's kindness, we were finally able to find him." Emily's mouth fell open. "He told you about me?" she asked, stepping forward. Both officers smiled slightly. "He said a little girl with a red scarf gave him her lunch and treated him like he mattered. He said that after she left, he decided to sit in a spot where people might notice him, and someone finally did. That led us straight to him." Her mother placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, both proud and surprised. "Is he okay?" she asked. The taller officer nodded. "He's safe now, and he wanted us to tell you something in person." Emily's heart pounded. She didn't know why, but her hands felt warm and shaky all at once. "What?" she whispered. The officer's eyes softened. Kay said, "You reminded him there's still good in the world, Kay, and that you saved him in more ways than one." 4. A moment, the doorway was filled with silence, not awkward silence, but the kind that feels heavy with meaning. Emily didn't know what to say. She just pictured him again on that bench, holding her sandwich like it was treasure. The officers thanked her and her mother, then handed over a small envelope. From him, they explained. "He insisted you have this." Inside was a handwritten note. The letters were a little shaky, but clear. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Emily held the paper close to her chest, her eyes stinging just a little. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. There was more to his story than she could possibly imagine, and soon she would learn it. The day after the police visit. The world outside seemed strangely louder to Emily. Cars rumbled past, leaves rustled in the wind, and faraway voices echoed down the street. But inside her, everything felt still, as if her mind was holding onto the weight of the officer's words. Thomas, a missing veteran, a man who'd been alone for months. Her mother had placed the small note from him on the mantel, where it stood propped against a framed family photo. Emily found herself staring at it over and over again. The handwriting wasn't perfect, a little uneven, like the writer's hands had been through years of work and weather. But the words were steady enough to feel certain. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. That afternoon, a knock came again, but this time it wasn't the sharp official kind. It was softer, almost hesitant. Emily ran to the window and peeked through the curtain, and her breath caught. It was him. Thomas stood on their porch, wearing the same gray coat she had seen in the park. But something about him looked different now. His hair was trimmed, his face clean-shaven, and though his coat was still old, it looked freshly washed. In his hands, he held a small brown paper bag. Emily's mother opened the door, her surprise evident. Thomas. He gave a polite nod, his eyes flicking from her to Emily. I hope I'm not intruding. The officers told me where you lived. I just wanted to thank you properly. Emily stepped forward, her small face lit up with recognition. You found a place to stay. Thomas smiled, faint but real. Yes, the shelter arranged something for me, and my sister came to see me. Her mother invited him inside, and Thomas sat gingerly on the edge of their couch, as though still unsure if he belonged there. He rested the paper bag on his lap, then began to speak, his voice quiet but clear. I served in the army for 10 years, he said. When I came back, I wasn't the same. My sister tried to help, but I didn't want her to see me struggling. I left, thinking I'd figure it out on my own. But the weeks turned into months, and I got used to disappearing. Emily listened intently, her fingers twisting the edge of her sweater. People pass me every day, Thomas continued. They'd glance for a second, then look away, like I wasn't real. I started to believe maybe I wasn't, until you. His eyes shifted toward her, softening. You sat down in front of me without fear. You gave me your food without hesitation, and when you looked at me, you saw me. Emily swallowed hard. She didn't think she'd done anything so special, but hearing it from him made it feel different, bigger. Thomas went on, his voice catching just slightly. That night, I went to a spot near the police station, thinking maybe someone might ask who I was, and someone did. They recognized me from a missing person's photo. The next morning, I was sitting with my sister, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. He opened the paper bag and pulled out a small loaf of bread, still warm, wrapped in a clean kitchen towel. It's not much, he said, placing it on the table. But I baked this at the shelter's kitchen. Thought maybe I could give something back to the girl who gave me the first meal I'd had in days. Emily smiled shyly, her hands resting gently on the bread, as if it were something precious. Thomas looked around the room, then back at her. You didn't just give me food, Emily. You gave me back the idea that maybe people still cared. And that's worth more than anything. Her mother's eyes glistened as she thanked him, and Emily, not knowing what else to do, stood and gave him a hug. Thomas froze for a second, then slowly returned it, his arms wrapping around her in a way that was both careful and strong. What Emily didn't know yet was that her simple act had set in motion not just a reunion, but a change in Thomas's life that would ripple far beyond this single meeting. The day of the reunion was one Emily would never forget, though at first she didn't even know it was going to happen. Her mother had told her that Thomas was coming by again, but this time he wouldn't be alone. He'd called the night before to say his sister had insisted on meeting the little girl who changed everything. Emily wasn't sure what to expect. She tried to imagine what his sister would be like. Maybe tall and serious, maybe gentle and soft-spoken like Thomas, or maybe the kind of person who would cry the moment they saw him. It was late morning when they heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. Emily rushed to the window, her heart beating a little faster. A modest silver sedan parked by the curb. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 30s, with chestnut-brown hair pulled back into a neat braid. She stood for a moment by the car, as if steadying herself, before looking toward the porch. Then the passenger door opened, and Thomas stepped out. He looked different again, even better than the last time she'd seen him. He was wearing a clean, button-up shirt, his posture straighter, his eyes brighter. But what caught Emily's attention most was the way his sister looked at him. It wasn't just relief. It was love and disbelief and a kind of aching joy all tangled together. Before he could even close the car door, she was moving toward him. And then she was running. "Tom," she cried, her voice breaking on the single word. Thomas didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, and in the next instant, she collided with him, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. He held her just as tightly, his chin resting on her shoulder. Emily saw his eyes close, and his lips pressed together as if holding back tears. "I thought I'd lost you," his sister whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," he replied softly. "I thought I'd lost myself." They stood there for a long time, not caring about the curious eyes from the houses nearby or the wind tugging at their clothes. It was as if they were trying to make up for all the months they'd missed in one embrace. Emily and her mother stepped quietly onto the porch, watching the scene unfold. Her mom's hand found hers and gave it a gentle squeeze. "That, her," Mother whispered, "is what hope looks like when it finally comes home." When Thomas and his sister finally pulled back, both were wiping at their eyes. She turned and spotted Emily on the porch. Her face softened into a smile, and she approached, slowly, almost as if approaching someone precious. "You must be Emily," she said. Her voice was warm and a little shaky. "Thomas has told me about you, more than once. He said you were the reason he decided to stop hiding." Emily's cheeks warmed. "I just gave him my lunch," she said, shrugging a little. The woman crouched down so they were eye level. "Sometimes," she said, "it's the smallest thing that changes everything. You didn't just give him lunch. You gave him a reason to believe someone cared. And that's something I'll never forget." She pulled Emily into a hug, a soft, grateful hug that smelled faintly of lavender. And when she let go, she pressed something into Emily's hand. It was a small silver charm in the shape of a dove. "It's a symbol of hope," she explained. "Keep it, so you'll always remember that kindness matters more than you know." As the three of them stood together in the sunlight, Thomas, his sister, and the little girl who had brought them back together, Emily felt a quiet pride blooming in her chest. She hadn't gone looking for any of this, but somehow she had helped make it happen. And though she didn't know it yet, the story wasn't over. There was still one more lesson, one final moment, waiting to show her just how far one act of kindness could go. Life slowly returned to its usual rhythm after that day, but something inside Emily had changed. The park still looked the same. The walk home still had the same bookstore, the same bakery, and the same neighbor's cat sleeping lazily on the fence. But now, whenever she passed the bench in the far corner, she didn't just see an empty seat, she saw a memory. She saw Thomas hunched forward with tired eyes. And she saw herself walking toward him, holding out her lunch. Weeks went by, and sometimes she would get updates from her mom about Thomas. He was living in a small apartment now, found with the help of the shelter. He'd started volunteering at a community kitchen. baking bread and serving warm meals to people who had been through the same struggles he once faced. Emily imagined him standing there with flour on his hands, smiling in that quiet way of his, remembering how one sandwich had been the start of it all. One Saturday morning, Thomas came by again, this time without police or family, just himself, a fresh loaf of bread under his arm. They sat at the kitchen table, eating muffins her mother had baked, and talked about small things: the weather, the books he liked, the people he met at the kitchen. At one point, Thomas said something that stayed in Emily's mind for years. "You never really know what someone's carrying," he told her. "You can't see their whole story just by looking at them. But one act of kindness can open a door they've kept shut for a long time. That's what you did for me. You opened the door." Emily didn't say much in reply. She just smiled. But inside, she felt something warm and steady. She realized that kindness wasn't just about giving people things. It was about seeing them, really seeing them, when the rest of the world looks away. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in orange and gold, Emily sat on the porch steps with her mom. The silver dove charm Thomas's sister had given her rested in her hand, cool and smooth. She thought about how different things might have been if she had walked past Thomas that day without stopping. He might still be missing. He might still believe no one cared. And it struck her in the way simple truths sometimes do, that small choices could change the world for someone, even if it was just their world. From then on, Emily never forgot that lesson. She carried it quietly, like a secret treasure, into every part of her life. And years later, whenever she saw someone sitting alone, she remembered the man on the bench, the sandwich, the knock on the door, and the reunion that had unfolded because a little girl decided to stop and care. Because sometimes the most ordinary days aren't ordinary at all. They're the start of something bigger, something that can change a life forever.